Do mind the content warning. For those who are unaware of what Crossed is, there will be graphic violence and violent content of a sexual nature. You have been warned. If you've seen my other Crossed video, you should know very well what to expect in that regards. So for those who don't know, Crossed is a comic series generally following survivors during an apocalyptic viral outbreak that, instead of zombies, turns the infected into homicidal maniacs with little to no sense of self-preservation. That's the long and short of it. I did cover Crossed Volume 1 in a previous video. There'll be a link in the description to that, and hopefully if YouTube's nice to me, there'll be something popping up on screen. If you have not seen or read Crossed Volume 1, please do check that out first. I feel like being at least aware of Volume 1 or other Crossed stories really helps before just jumping into this one, although I suppose it doesn't hurt to start here either. But do go check out Crossed Volume 1 if you haven't. It's quite entertaining. There are quite a few entries in the Crossed series. There are many volumes, and today I want to talk about a story from Crossed Badlands. Badlands being an anthology series with 100 issues, with multiple arcs in it that are essentially, for the most part, self-contained stories. Some of them connect to each other, some of them connect to other volumes outside of Badlands, and each one is generally anywhere from 3 to 6 issues long. Today I want to talk about what I feel is a very special entry in the Badlands catalog, that being the arc called The Thin Red Line. This one in particular because it is written by Garth Ennis and establishes a lot of lore for the series, and in my opinion is also one of the best Crossed stories that has been created. It's a very entertaining story, and we get some pretty big lore dumps on the nature of the virus and how it managed to upend governments so quickly. And of course, before we really get into it, I do have to say this video is split into 2 parts, so if you like what you see here today and you are not already subscribed, please like and subscribe and hit the bell notification, because the next part should be coming out in a matter of days. And if you have any comments on the story that we cover here today, or you have any recommendations of what you'd like to see me cover in the future, go ahead and leave a comment. I do read all my comments, and for the most part, I try to respond to them all too, if there's something I can respond to. But with that out of the way, let's get into Crossed, The Thin Red Line, and let's see what we can elucidate on the nature of the Crossed virus. So, our comic opens up with literally a black screen with just some narration, explaining that a man was running from the terror of his own laughter, that he had something that seemed alive inside him, ready to come out at any instant, and he was also running from the despair his wife had felt as she tried to stop him, that he was running from the voice that he heard in the base of his skull, that was new like shining steel, yet ancient as a dagger. A smirking hiss. Come to see that this man it is describing is running through a field at night, completely barefoot, with some torn clothes. He has a look of sheer panic on his face. The narration continues, explaining that even as he whipped through the world, whatever spoke to him, it was devouring him slowly and extinguishing every instinct he possessed, and that it infiltrated his numb routine with fresh imperatives. That he had been glancing at a picture of him, his wife, and his 2 children, and then, while looking at that photo, instead of his family, he started to see the horrors of the previous century, things like the gates of Auschwitz, and piles of limbs that were not sticks, as the comic would quote it. We then get a quick flashback where we see him knelt over a bathtub, and there appears to be a little arm sticking out, while what is clearly a woman, and presumably his wife, looks on in horror. Cutting back to the narration as he's still running along, the narrator lets us know that eventually there was a vast black shape, a sound so huge it even drowned the screaming inside him. And for one vital second, he could think like he used to, telling himself he was a fool. What have you done? They loved you. Clearly this man is struggling with something. That'll be the rest of the world's problem, as those of you who have already seen Volume 1 are well aware of. But we are getting to that. Moving on. back to what is happening on the ground in front of us. The narration ends, and we see that at least in some way, the large, loud shape was in fact a fighter jet taking off overhead, which has caused our running man to trip and fall and go down a pretty sizable hill, where he gets tumbling real good to the point where he can slam straight through a wooden fence and spill out onto the nearby road, where he nearly gets run over by a police car that happens to be going by. Cops, of course, stop, get out, in a panic because a bloodied man has just spilt out onto the road. And now, for a minute, we will be cutting away to our other main cast of characters. This scene now in the daylight, with the narrator letting us know that, at least at this point in time, our story is taking place in the summer of 2008. We have some sort of politician out with the news media, meeting with a bunch of school children, while the men that make up his bodyguard begin to give the all clear. These bodyguards, at least amongst themselves, seem to be using nicknames, code names, and they're really simple ones. The Englishman, the Irishman, the Scotsman, and the Welshman. They all give each other the all clear, and the one that identifies as the Englishman says that it's about time for them to get going. As the politician they are escorting is getting into his vehicle, he asks his aide who is waiting for him if there's any news, where we then learn that this politician in particular is the Prime Minister of the UK, while his aide, who's named Alistair by the way, keep him in mind, he will be very important to some of the critical events of this story, is giving him an update on the day's news, including a shooting in the United States. Just as the Prime Minister is about to go off on what is wrong with the Americans, the Englishman shows up and pulls a microphone that has been hidden in the Prime Minister's pockets by one of the news media people. This puts the Prime Minister in a bit of a tizzy, angry at Alistair for not catching this, where he informs Alistair that Harry, the Englishman in this case, shouldn't have to watch out for nonsense like that because he is running security, and that Alistair, being the political aide, should absolutely be on top of things like this. We then cut to a British airbase where two pilots, who will be very important to this story, and I just gotta say, like, it can't just be me, right? But clearly, like, the dude is supposed to be Liam Neeson, and the other one is Angelina Jolie. Like, please tell me I'm not crazy. That's totally who these people were modeled after, which I just find kind of hilarious. Like, we got young redhead Liam Neeson here. I don't know why I find it so humorous, but I do. Anywho, our two pilots are in what appears to be the mess hall, looking at a picture from World War II from when someone in their same squadron had bombed a dam, and they are discussing whether or not the two of them would be capable of pulling something off like that, or if they'd be a disgrace to their unit. They start ribbing each other about how they won't have a chance to ever actually do anything like that, where the female pilot then asks the Liam Neeson lookalike here if he'd prefer to get sent off somewhere else instead of having a female co-pilot. He says he doesn't care, he won't change drivers, and then ribs her about almost splattering him across North Yorkshire at 700 knots. Continue going back and forth before the bar hand gets a call, and our two pilots are informed that the wing commander wants to see them in his office straight away, where as they're walking to go see the commander, they ask each other how their significant others are doing, which they both just give a simple fine, hint hint. Alright, we cut to our Englishman in what looks to be a fancy coffee shop, reading a magazine and enjoying his free time, when that time is interrupted by Alistair, who is confronting him, telling him that he needs to concern himself with bodyguard duties and not focus on other things, or he's not going to be able to properly look after him. Harry, the Englishman, fires back quite sarcastically that, you know, when I handed him off to the other security team at 2, he was definitely still breathing, and that he's had the job for a year now, and he's pretty sure the PM has not died once under his watch. Alistair then tries to repeat that he needs to focus on the physical and the political is his department. Harry then brings up the earlier situation in which Alistair got chewed out. Before Alistair can go off, Harry lets Alistair know that he's heard an interesting rumor about him, that he tried to join Tony Blair's team when he went off to the private sector, but he was rejected, and so he fell back on option B. Alistair then asked him what is he suggesting, where Harry fires back, potentially sabotage, in that he supposes it depends how determined Alistair is on being a great man's catamite. Alistair, confused, begins to ask, with Harry just saying, look it up. This, of course, Alistair, wanting to be a posh English politician and being put down by a soldier, really starts to fire off, saying that he's got a considerable degree of political influence and, he could have Harry out on the northwest frontier overnight. Harry, of course, just laughs at him, and then, as the rest of his team shows up, informs Alistair that he's going to have a bit of entertainment if Alistair repeats that in front of the rest of his team. Alistair then fires back, why do you care so much? It's not like you vote Tory, with Harry firing back that, yeah, you're right, but doesn't matter. How I vote is for me and myself. That's what's fair, which Alistair then just kind of has his little tantrum and stomps out. The rest of the bodyguards show up, where we now learn that the Welshman, the bald guy by the way, his name is Taff, and that he's found a nice little pub down the road. Of course, Harry's asking what's wrong with this place, and the rest of the crew are informing him that it is way too winky for their taste. We move on to the Prime Minister with Alistair and his alternate security team traveling along, and Alistair is informing the Prime Minister of a situation he has just been informed of, a very strange one. The North Yorkshire police are reporting an incident involving some of their officers in a small town. This is, of course, the incident involving the running man at the beginning of the comic, who fell out onto the road. It appears the two officers tried to help him. He was incoherent and attacked the officers. They had to subdue him and take him to the station. They made a call to a hospital in a nearby town called Hemsley, where paramedics were sent out. However, when they got to the station, they found the running man walking around inside, completely docile, but there were just two officers in the station. One was comatose, and the other seems to have taken his own life. None of the other officers were present, and there should have been 9 stationed there. That is when the paramedics noticed that pretty much it seemed like the entire town was abandoned, with its population missing. Several officers came in from surrounding towns, and they completed their search, and every single building in the town is empty. There is no sign of the local population. The Prime Minister then asked, what does this have to do with the man that the police found on the moors? Where Alistair informs him that's where things get even more serious. The original paramedics that had come out from Hemsley had crashed the ambulance on the way back, and it looked as if the two paramedics had murdered each other. The running man was still aboard, and he made no attempt to resist the responding officers. Someone on the scene put 2 and 2 together, and he was rushed to a quarantine facility, where the authorities started assuming he has some kind of contagious infection. The facility he was taken to, however, Alistair continues, contains a fully securable command component, in that it's a government site kept running for ministers such as the PM to run to in the event of a biological or nuclear attack, where they can still stay in communication with the rest of the government. He then asks if he wants the Prime Minister to go there now. One of the bodyguards jumps in and points out that you want the Prime Minister to go to the same building where they have this infectious guy. Alistair responds that they've got him locked up, and that there are people with protocols in place who know what they're doing, and that there's someone there who wants to speak to the PM as soon as possible, and that since the PM's going to be working with these people anyways, he might as well go. The bodyguard then asked, did the Prime Minister's office actually confirm on the phone that the individual is secure and there's no risk of the Prime Minister being infected? Alistair responds that yes, of course, and continues to reiterate his belief that this is the best course of action. The bodyguard then asks the Prime Minister what he wants, where the Prime Minister gets extremely indecisive. We then cut to the facility where the Prime Minister has shown up, where we meet the person running the facility, Anushka Chopra, who is the senior medical officer. Prime Minister asks her, aside from the missing townspeople, have they found anyone else that has been infected? Are they here, or are they going to be brought here? She begins telling him that it's very difficult to be 100% on something like that, where we jump to Alistair and the bodyguard from before are arguing about the fact that the Prime Minister has come here, with the bodyguard reiterating that the Prime Minister should have gone to Checkers, where he could have convened Cobra and handled the whole thing from there and just spoken to the people here over the phone. Alistair tries to reiterate everything again. Bodyguard isn't having it and tells him that he wants to call Harry's team and get them over here for backup. When, before anyone can say anything else, the running man smashes into the room they are all in through the quarantine area and starts running right towards the whole group. The bodyguards, of course, draw their guns, but Dr. Chopra begs them not to shoot him. So instead, as he comes running, one of the bodyguards just hits the running man in the face, and some of his blood splatters on the bodyguard's face. For those of you who've seen my earlier crossed video, you already know what that means, don't ya? Anywho, the running man is, well, completely knocked out with that single punch. And we cut to the pub that Harry's crew has wanted to go to. And we see why, as there is a very well-endowed barmaid. Patty, who is the Irishman, the one with brown hair. Obviously, that's not his actual name, but, you know, he's the Irishman in the groups. There you go. He is enamored with the barmaid and asks Harry if he can go ahead and order another round and, get to talking. Harry comments that he's been waiting on Duff to check in by now and that he should have, and that might as well go ahead since they're on standby, with Patty trying to work his magic with the barmaid. We have a bit of a time jump, as Harry and his team have now shown up at the medical facility the Prime Minister was taken to. Dr. Chopra is trying to explain the situation to him, while Harry is trying to rush to see the Prime Minister. He's worried about the call that he received and wants to ascertain the situation with the Prime Minister himself. However, Dr. Chopra insists that she explain everything and show him what has happened, as that ties directly in with the Prime Minister's security. She assures him that the Prime Minister is quite safe downstairs in a lower level, but that the security team from before, led by John Duff, was caught up in an incident. Of course, we already know that. As she leads the team along, she begins to explain everything, that they are absolutely dealing with a contagious infection, and that they think that they have patient 0 in the facility. And of course, as we know, he got loose when the Prime Minister arrived. Harry follows this up with asking what he was doing here in the first place. Chopra informs him that she thinks it was Alistair that made the decision. She then goes on to explain that the incident caught her staff off guard with the patient trying to escape, but that they have armed security now and they've sealed the wing of the building he's being kept in, so it can't happen again. She then goes on, saying that they haven't learned much about the infection other than it can be spread by physical contact and body fluid, because so far, the only people who aren't showing signs of being infected are the ones who haven't made any direct contact. She then goes to explain the bodyguard that hit patient 0 became nauseous and disorientated almost immediately. 3 others went to his aid, and they felt it was best to quarantine the 3 of them before they could spread the infection further. As she begins to open the sealed door, she warns them that they need to prepare themselves, and she continues explaining what had happened. That during the examination, one of the infected men attacked the lab attendant, and the others tried to restrain him at first, before they started joining in. 2 more attendants tried to get control of the situation, but the bodyguards being armed and physically capable, the staff didn't stand much chance. So Dr. Chopra then decided that the best course of action would be to seal the exam rooms with her people still stuck inside. As she finishes saying this, Harry and his team can look into the exam room finally, and they are utterly shocked and horrified. And now we get to see for ourselves. And oh boy, what a spread. It's one of these first big gory spreads where I don't think I actually have to censor all that much. So yeah, you can get a pretty good idea what's going on. Like to notice, thank God the guy's expunged all his ammo already in the pistol. And yeah, there are just intestines everywhere. They have been going to town. It's quite astounding. All they're missing is the red crosses, and well, this is part of the course. Vicious. Dr. Chopra then goes on that this is what the virus does to, or contagion, whatever, does to people, except for the first patient, patient 0, and that 2 of her people are isolated separately, and they went the same way. That's when the Welshman points out they only see 2. What happened to young Maxwell? Where Chopra lets us know that they've been using him as his body smacks up against the window. Movie moment there. Gnarly. Yeah, you can just see for yourselves. It's not pretty. She then goes on to explain they killed the first 2 attendants almost immediately, and that when they sealed the room, they started to go at the 3rd attendant, but then they started to get other ideas, and that by the time they were done with him, there was next to nothing left. And then that's when they turned on the 3rd bodyguard, the one in the window. Harry asks what would make somebody do this, and she says they simply have no idea. They have blood samples and other samples as well from multiple of the infected, and they can't seem to find anything. She then asks, since there's nothing left to see here, if he'd like to go talk to the Prime Minister, which, obviously he's going to want to talk to the Prime Minister, and probably more than anything, get them the hell out of here. We then cut to his meeting with the Prime Minister. Alistair and Dr. Chopra are both present, and the Prime Minister is absolutely feeling terrible over what has happened to Duff's security team, with Harry trying to reassure him that they were doing their jobs and that, what happened was collateral as part of that job, and that he needs to quit worrying about it, and that their priority now needs to be getting the Prime Minister back to London where he can convene with the rest of the government. Alistair, of course, objects, saying this is the safest place in the whole country. It's the whole reason they came here, because there's all these infected people crawling around outside. Harry then informs him they're going to have a little talk about that, and then asks Dr. Chopra what the extent of the outbreak is, with her stating that they're not really sure, but there's definitely at least one small village affected. Harry asks her to elaborate, and she says the entire population is missing. Of course, that was talked about at the beginning of the story, but that the townspeople that are missing were definitely exposed, and that there's police and mountain rescue out looking for them. But things might be even more serious, as they don't really know anything about Patient 0, the running man. For example, they have no idea how he got infected, when or where, and where has he been in between the time that he got infected first and showed up where the police picked him up on the side of the road, as well as not knowing who he could have possibly interacted with before that happened. And that as well, he has nothing on him to identify him. They have no idea what his name is, but that at best they can just guess where he could be from based on his accent. But he's also educated, so he could have honestly come from anywhere. Prime Minister asks her if they have any idea how fast or far it might spread, which she then just simply follows up, you've seen that for yourself. And as well as, until they can actually identify the contagion itself, there's definitely going to be no way of stopping it. The Prime Minister then asks Harry what he thinks he should do. Alistair Minister jumps in, simply stating, "What are you asking him for?" Harry concedes that Alistair has a point, as he's not a political advisor, and he's just the head of security, where he begins to tell the Prime Minister what he'd like to do. Alistair jumps in and objects, and says that no decisions should be discussed or taken with Harry present. The Prime Minister snaps back a little bit for once, like he occasionally does, although quite wimpily, stating that Alistair isn't the one who can do any insisting. He then goes on to tell Harry that, Dr. Chopra's been involved from the beginning, so he couldn't ask for a better scientific advisor, and that if he goes back to Whitehall and convenes the crisis committee, somewhere down the list of consultees, he'll eventually be talking to the force commanders. But Harry's there now, and he wants Harry's opinion on what he thinks they'll say. Harry then follows that up with telling him that he needs to declare a state of emergency and use the army to quarantine the region, while he calls in for a helicopter to come pick him up with a full squadron to escort the chopper back to London. The Prime Minister points out that there'll be civil panic and unrest. Harry simply tells him to suppress it. Alistair jumps in, asking, "Why are we listening to this?" with Harry following up, "Or do you want what's happening next door to happen into a major city?" The Prime Minister tells him that he's got some thinking to do, but yes, to absolutely go ahead and call a helicopter to come in. Harry then gives the word to Patty, and then Harry inquires about talking to Patient Zero himself. We then cut to Harry standing outside the exam room that Patient Zero is being housed in. As they stare each other down, our narrator chimes back in to let us know what is going through the mind of Patient Zero. And I'm just going to quote it directly because I think it's interesting. The first thing he said, he was sorry, but when they asked, he didn't know what for. Beyond a suspicion of enormous wrongdoing, his mind would yield no worthwhile details. Glancing at his bandaged limbs, he asked about whoever treated him, and the woman dropped her gaze just long enough to break his heart. Some instinct told him panic would destroy him, would breach a door beyond which lay the thing he fought to quell. He focused on their questions: where he'd come from, what he'd done, who he touched, the one he thought the strangest until they asked him what his name might be. He didn't know, he said, and stared, and began at last to understand the reason for his sorrow. Very interesting. We're going to talk about Patient Zero, but I'm going to save it for the actual end of the story, because I think there's a decent little bit there to talk about. Anyways, he begins talking to Dr. Chopra and Harry, stating simply that he gave the samples and he'll give them whatever else they need to make sense of things, and that he needs to know just as much as they do. Harry asked Dr. Chopra if they tested his DNA. She lets him know that there was nothing in the criminal database, which she doesn't find very surprising by looking at him. Harry commenting that he has the deputy assistant manager look. Dr. Chopra then asks Patient Zero, "Is there anything you haven't told us yet? Or is there something you're nervous about telling us?" He begins to stutter a little bit. Dr. Chopra tries coaxing him out a little bit more, but he kind of just shuts up for a bit. At this point, Patty comes in and informs Harry that the heli is on its way and should be there in about 20 minutes. Harry then goes back to talking to Patient Zero, where Patient Zero asks Harry his name. Harry goes ahead and obliges him, where he responds with, "You've killed Harry. I can smell them on you. I can smell the stink of their screams." Dr. Chopra asks him, of course, how the hell can you smell anything in there? And he simply just says, "I can't talk. I want to, but I can't. I have to make it go away." Of course, that obviously is in reference to the hissing voice hinted at the beginning of the opening narration. I think we all know what that is. Not that hard to guess. Harry then leaves the exam area, where we see Alistair's waiting right outside, and it is time for them to have that little chat. Alistair tries to stress his point again, that this is the safest place for the Prime Minister to be, where then Harry begins to point out that they should absolutely not be intending on staying here, and that this location should have been considered only ever temporary. He then questions Alistair. Before coming here, did he talk to Dr. Chopra himself on the phone? He begins to very weaselly, in a measle-mouthed way, imply that he did without actually saying it, where Harry then cuts him off and lets him know that he's spoken to Dr. Chopra and that she doesn't remember having a conversation with Alistair at all, and that she spoke to someone at the Home Office. And next thing she knew, they called her back to say that the Prime Minister was on his way, and that if she had spoken to Alistair or the Prime Minister first, she would have let them know that she wanted to speak to the Prime Minister by phone, but under no circumstances should he have ever come to the facility. He then tries saying that that's just her side of the story, with Harry saying that he'd really love to hear John Duff's version, but unfortunately he can't do any talking. And if there's anything else in Alistair's defense he'd like to say. Alistair then starts getting really angry, where Harry responds that you've done 4 of my men in and endangered the Prime Minister, where Alistair really starts to rant and goes off about you and your precious Prime Minister. He then goes on a bit of a rant, which I actually feel, at least partially, is the whole point of this comic, where Alistair, and I quote, says, "Do you think he even listened to you? He's been on the phone ever since we got here. He talked to people before you, and he's talking to people now, and it's typical. He says he has a decision to make, he asks for advice, he gets it, and then he won't make the bloody decision, and that's what I'm up against every fucking day of the week." End quote. Harry lets him know, well, that's your job. And whenever I might have said to him earlier, mine is to protect him. At that point, Welsh comes in and lets Harry know that Patty needs to talk to him ASAP. Harry heads up to talk to Patty, where Patty lets him know that the helicopter is no longer coming to get the Prime Minister, and that an RAF Tornado has gone rogue, a Tornado being a British aircraft, fighter jet, basically went rogue, started flying funny, and then before anyone knew it, the helicopter started taking fire, and that they've lost track of the tornado on radar. Welsh asks if the tornado's off screen, could it be that it collided with the helicopter? The Scotsman lets him know that just because it's lost on radar doesn't mean it's down. Tornado pilots are trained to fly low, so it could actually be anywhere. As the team goes in to inform the Prime Minister of what's going on, him, Alistair, and Dr. Chopra are watching a news broadcast where she's informing Harry that the situation's changed and that the news media has found the missing people from the village, and that there's a helicopter flying over the crowd and is broadcasting it live. The Prime Minister, very frustrated, asks who would be dumb enough to inform the media, with Alistair basically saying that any police officer or paramedic involved in the search could have been bought off. Alistair then points out that by not declaring a state of emergency, they absolutely have no control over what gets out to the media. With the Prime Minister then hitting back with, "Oh, so I should have done what Harry said," with Alistair saying, "Doing anything would have been better than what you're doing now." As we then get to see the broadcast for ourselves, where it turns out the entire townspeople, many of whom are stripped naked, are just marching along in the countryside, where all of a sudden we see that violence is occasionally breaking out in the crowd as they are turning on each other. It is then that the camera sweeps around to the front of the crowd, and we see what they are marching towards. An absolute cliff face, where they are tumbling to their deaths like lemmings. Well, if there was going to be panic over martial law, I would imagine panic over contagion making people do this is going to be hell of a lot worse. We now cut back to our 2 pilots. Yeah, the 2 pilots towards the beginning of the episode, they're finally going to start being relevant to the plot now. By the way, female pilot is Jackie, the male is Tom. I haven't said their names yet, but there you go. Jackie and Tom are outside on the airfield, standing by their aircraft, with Jackie sulking because obviously with everything going on, the plane's been grounded. Obviously, Jackie doesn't quite realize what's actually going on, or you probably wouldn't be so bummed out. At least it's implied that she's bummed out because she thinks she's been grounded because of her flying. When a man named Ollie pulls up to try to inform them what's been going on, telling them about the tornado that's gone rogue. As they're talking about it and he's explaining that they've lost it, Jackie and Tom actually start to notice it flying around behind him, and with barely any time to react, the tornado actually crashes into the airfield. With a massive explosion taking place, we see Jackie and Tom has survived. However, the guy who came out to talk to them, Ollie, has been impaled with some shrapnel and very quickly dies out. While Jackie wants to stop to help Ollie, Tom lets her know that there's absolutely no way he's going to survive that, and that they need to get away from the aircraft before they explode further from their fuel burning. That's when Jackie notices off in the distance a semi-truck coming barreling up to the fence to the airfield and completely smashes through it, colliding into the fire truck that's been deployed to try to put out the mess. And right behind the semi-truck, a fresh crowd of infected, right on cue. We then cut to inside the bunker, and the Prime Minister has finally gone down to the command room. Him and Alistair are on the phone trying to get things moving, while the Prime Minister is talking to somebody else, telling them that he tends to take over full operational control before immediately backing down to whatever it is they're saying that, they've given a great example and that he'll just defer to whoever's on the ground once he's been consulted, of course. And that he is also considering talking to the press. Patty and Harry are onlooking as things are playing out, with Patty commenting to Harry that at least you got him down here. Harry saying, at least we got halfway. But what's the point of an impregnable command bunker if the Prime Minister isn't going to close the door? As we can see, the Prime Minister's indecisiveness is just absolutely going to bog everything he does. Harry then tells, okay, so I haven't really gone over the names of the squad yet, which is hindsight, not the best idea. Okay, so the leader's obviously Harry. Patty is the brown-haired Irishman. The bald Welshman is Jock. And the tall Scotsman, that's Taft. Alright, got that out of the way. Sorry about that. It's this late into the video I covered it, but there you go. Alright, so Harry gives Jock and Taff the orders to bolt themselves to the Prime Minister's hip, and that Patty needs to go make the call for Squadron B to come back them up. That's when Alistair chimes in that they're getting reports of incidents all over the region, so he totally made the right move, guys. Harry tells him to rethink that before they're interrupted and start paying attention to the Prime Minister discussing the recent plane crash, where he asks, well, shouldn't that lift the air traffic ban? Where he then informs them that the consensus he has heard from other members of the government is that with everything going on, there's absolutely a coordinated attack, and that he has ordered the rest of the government to take the appropriate preparations. He then asked the doctor if it's possible that the virus was released deliberately, which she simply says it's not impossible, but she wouldn't be able to tell without an actual isolated sample that they can identify. But that it is a strange way to try to kill off a population or attack an enemy nation using a virus like this. Unless, of course, the infection is tailored to eventually destroy the host and safely consume itself. Because otherwise, what's the point of invading a half-suicidal, half-homicidal population? Harry then asks, what if it was designed just to kill everybody? She then says that there are plenty of agents already out there that could do that in a fraction of the time this is taking, without the risk of the infection coming back to the attackers. And that, from what she's seen, the spread for this virus is almost limitless. And that anyone who would be toying with something like this would be absolutely toying with hellfire. Alistair then asks, how have we gone from that little nobody, Patient Zero, to it affecting RAF pilots? With Dr. Chakras saying it's the same questions. who, where, when, how many, and for how long. They know they began the infection when he interacted with just 1 or 2 police officers, but if he was on a bus or a cafe, anywhere else the pilots could have been before that happened, then it is entirely possible people got infected that way. And that one truly bizarre aspect is that Patient Zero's own docility. At least apart from the one Manic episode. Where Alistair fires back Manic, he tried to attack the Prime Minister. Where Harry simply asks, was the Prime Minister just simply in his way? Where the Prime Minister confirms Harry's thought, saying that it didn't even seem like Patient Zero really noticed him, he was just hell-bent on trying to get out of the building. With Harry following that up with, he appears to be frightened more than anything, and then asks if he can have another word with him. We then cut to Patient Zero and Harry's next conversation. Harry asks if the man is hungry or thirsty, and he says no, and that the only thing he wants is to find out what happened to his life. Harry then asks him about the statement he made earlier, where he could smell the screams of the people he killed on him, and if he could explain what that means. Patient Zero simply says that he can't, but he knows it's the case. That he can taste murder, hear blood, it has a sound, a pounding, pumping sound apparently. He then describes it as if it's being squeezed along a tunnel under immense pressure, far underground, but charging to the surface. He then asks Harry if he's right about him, the fact that Harry is a murderer, which Harry responds with, yeah, but there wasn't an awful lot of screaming, unless you count Allahu Akbar. Harry then asks, how did he end up being able to hear, smell, and taste these things? And then answering that question, it might help with what they all need to know. Patient Zero responds with, I might have hurt someone I care about. I think I can feel them. Harry then asks him, you said you had to make it go away again just before you stopped talking to the doctor. You said it. Is this it? He responds with that it's something very different, and he's really certain of that. Harry asks him to describe it, and he just says a voice. A smiling voice. I think it'll be laughing soon, and when it does, there'll be no stopping it. He then asks Harry, do you believe in God? Harry responds, if this is a God told me to do it thing, I assure you I will not be impressed. Patient Zero just asks again, do you believe in God? Our narrator then chimes in as they intensely stare at each other. No, said the Englishman, I don't. But I believe in a part of man that he calls God, in which voice he speaks when he grants himself license to perform the utterly unspeakable. You should know, he said, that I killed a great many such men. And we end our narration, and we go back to our 2 pilots, Jackie and Tom. They are stuck outside at the airbase still, and as we can see, the infected are more and more starting to resemble the Cross that we've come to know, and, well, love isn't the right word. You get the point. And they are trying to get a grasp of what's going on. Shockingly, they've picked up that it's some kind of contagion, and they definitely don't want to get bit or touched by the people going insane. However, this conversation is interrupted by a large, rotund woman who is absolutely covered in filth, and she's holding a dead baby and hollering at him, asking him why she did that. They're obviously both in disgust, but before this scene can proceed any further, she is obliterated by an army jeep that comes pulling up right in the nick of time. I'm gonna be honest, I really don't know what to make of that scene, other than like, is Garth Ennis just trying to be shocking or something? I don't know. But anywho, this group of army men, being led by one Bill Joseph, is apparently out looking for a pilot and a navigator and needs to take them somewhere, and this is absolute priority. The pilots quickly hop in the car and grab some guns as they try to peel out of the airbase with absolute chaos going on around them. Eventually, the man on the Top Gun gets taken out by somebody jumping down from the roof of a building, and Jackie is forced to take up the machine gun. As they continue to join in on the carnage going on in their attempt to escape, where they actually do manage to pull out. We then go back to the facility where we see Dr. Chopra just looking absolutely exhausted as Harry comes up to check up on her. She lets Harry know that she is not doing very well at all and that she is genuinely scared for the first time. She was about to report to the PM, but then she had a bit of an epiphany. She goes on to say that they've managed to identify the virus, or at least that they identified the contagion is in fact a virus, but it doesn't look like anything she's ever seen before, and that it seems like the virus is becoming fully developed now, and that's why they were able to detect it in the blood samples. Harry asks the patient zero's samples, and she says no. His samples remain unchanged, they can't see anything, and his condition hasn't changed either. She means from the samples from the original security team that got infected. She then goes on to say that they got reports of a variety of symptoms, everything from the murderous rage that we are all well aware of, but there's also been self-harm, as we have also seen, as well as people simply going catatonic or just dying once infected. And that tied in with her theory about the virus taking its time to reach maturity. As she puts it, it wasn't certain of what it wants to be, but that's changing. And that she believes they're going to see less of the other symptoms and nothing but the pure rage. She theorizes that it might have been the natural aggression in the security team's characters that sped things up. But whatever the case is, when they introduce their infected blood to control samples, the virus takes over very quickly. So Harry then asks, how fast can it spread? She then goes on to say that while the times for physical and even mental alteration probably vary, the way the virus spreads through the bloodstream is unprecedented, so it's basically immediate. As soon as your bloodstream gets infected, that's it. You're gone. She says she knows things are getting really bad out there, but it was the mental math of figuring out global transmission that caused her to stop in her tracks just now. Where Harry interrupts her, picking up on the key words she had just said, going, hold on, physical alteration? What do you mean exactly? And she just says it's something. She wasn't looking at the monitor at the time, but one of her colleagues spotted it, and it was just after they were able to identify the virus. So she's assuming the development was simultaneous. She then just goes on to say that she has to report to the Prime Minister. If he wants to see, he needs to go look at the men. He then tries to ask her some more, what the hell are you talking about? And she says, just go look. So Harry goes ahead and goes into the quarantined area and goes and looks through the window into the examination room Duff and his men from earlier were being kept in. And we see that Duff has absolutely developed the iconic crossed rash / breakout boils on his face. And the crossed, as we know them from Volume 1, have finally fully manifested. Okay, so we're going to stop here for now. We will pick this up in part 2, where we will finish the origins of the crossed outbreak. Will Dr. Chopra be able to find more insight into the nature of the virus? Will our pilots get to where they need to go under mysterious orders? And will our running man be able to yield any more insight into how he started all this and initially became sick with the virus? Who knows? Only time will tell. If you want to find out, go ahead if you haven't already. Hit like and subscribe. Hit the bell notifications. You can be notified when the next part of this comes out in a couple days. Sorry about splitting it up. Just trying to experiment with something to see if in the next couple weeks I can get more content out on a regular basis. Till then, thank you for watching if you've gotten this far, and have a nice day.